Hello everybody, how you doing? This is Brad Deck reaching out to you, having my good old trusty cup of coffee. Yes, I do drink and eat and sleep. But as of late, I've been able to get some videos and stuff done for you awesome people out there in the world. The reason why I was reaching out to you today is to talk about something that is really not a bad idea at all if you really feel like you got the itch. And that is, how do I take my old PC tower and really make it powerful, but on the dime, not the dollar? In other words, do it cheap. Well, the answer to that question is simple. Dual Xeon motherboards. That's right, you heard me right. Xeon motherboards, SMP baseline motherboards, are basically dual platform motherboards that have the ability of basically acting as an introductionary server. The Xeon platform itself doesn't have to be new. Not really, because it's just not necessary. And yeah, you pay a lot of money for an unnecessary cost. When in actuality, what you want to do is you want to get something a little older. About 4 or 5 years old is really good because that's the equivalency of having multiple i7s or i5s in your system to do what you want to do. Now, as you can see in this photo, along with my icon as Ledius, you see a Dual XEON Supermicro motherboard, and it's feature rich. It has a lot of functionalities. It can handle a lot of RAM, and it's an SMB board, which means symmetric multiprocessing board, and it can take a hit. You can lose 50% of that bus board and still keep your processing running, which is really nice too. What it does, so as you notice there on the back side where the USB and PS2 and port connections are, there are also a lot of PCIe standard slots, both on the 16, the 8, and so on. No to X1s, because really X1s are more for a PC level, but you have the ability with this type of a motherboard, and you're talking maybe $50, somewhere between $50 and $100, and usually get both processors, the heatsink, maybe some RAM as well. So with that being said, for a fairly low cost, you can turn around and choose to basically cheat. You take a dual processor stack, and that means you're talking about 4 times the power of a standard i5 processor if you're on an E Series 5 Xeon platform, or if you are able to graduate up to the higher processors or equivalency to an i7. The amount of cores that you get is staggering, number one. Number two, the fact that you'll have between 6 to 8 slots of memory per processor. So that means 12 or 16 slots for memory. And since it's an SMP board, those slots are dedicated per each base board. So in other words, in a nutshell, you can do this. You can get, for instance, VMware's workstation tool and run 5 or 6 VMs locally in your operating system, may it be Linux or Microsoft. You're actually able to also run a stats server which can reach out to, let's say you're a gamer, so you reach out and pull your stats from the outside world and maintain a small database that is basically making it, refreshing it as necessary to reflect your scores, or something similar to that. Meanwhile, you're also using it as your basic OA system or office automation system for Microsoft Office, Outlook, or Open Office, or whatever flavor you're using for your operating system. And then on top of that, you right click and you play a game. Or for instance, in my case, I might have a game like X4 running in the background while I'm playing Team Fortress 2 on the front ground, because X4 requires that you don't have to manage it or you don't have to log into it for it to chronomically go forward and earn income and things like that while I'm playing a first-person shooter game. And that's the kind of functionality that you can have. So if you don't have a home lab, your workstation with a few upgrades from an old tower that you've got can act as your home lab for VM-wise, as long as you've got enough storage and you put enough RAM in. Somewhere between 48 to 128 gigs would do just fine. And that would allow you to have several small VM instances out there to, let's say, run a web tool or a domain controller, whatever you think you need to have as part of your VM experience. and of course all the other functionalities of what you can do. The nice thing is that there are a lot of Xeon motherboards out there. Like I said, 4 to 5 years of age is good because that's going to keep you in the PCIe Type 2 class or Generation Class 2 or 3 would be really good. You don't have to have the very latest. It's not necessary. These systems are really powerful systems if they run in the best way. The best way to do that is to run them in a Linux environment, or if you choose to tweak out your Windows 10 or 11 or Server 2019 to reach out and use the full capacity of your cores. But Linux will do it just fine. You know, it's a process and it's a learning process that you can't negate, but nevertheless, it still is a good overall upgrade, cheap upgrade that can allow you to do a lot. For instance, like if you buy one with a single processor and you've only got, let's say, 32 gigs of RAM, well, two great benefits. One, those Xeon processors are going to be cheap because there's a lot of them out there that people are trying to sell because they moved on. So buy a second processor and keep it cheap. Or you, let's say, for instance, want to just say, I don't want the current Xeon I want one processor with 24 cores. I don't want to run hot. I'll terminate the other bus, and I'm just going to have 128 gigs dedicated to my one processor. You can do that. Or you can do the opposite. You can say, you know what, I'm going to get the two best processors I can put on my motherboard. They only cost like $25, $30 each. Put them on with really good heat sinks, recommended heat sinks, that is. And then I'm going to put 64 gigs of RAM on each bus for a total of 128 gigs and rock and roll. And then I'm going to put a SAS RAID controller in there, and I'm going to have a disk array and blah and blee and blah and blah. So you're going to have not only a very powerful system, you'll have also an archiver, you also have a server launcher for VMs, instances, and quite a bit more. So this is just a caveat that's what's out there. And I run myself for my core system a Dual XEON Series 6480 X4 version, and I love it. It's lower voltage loads, but more scalable, and I've got the 3.6 gigahertz capacity with 48 cores, and that's sweet. You can't beat that when you really start putting workloads out there. And the last piece of this I'll explain to you. I'm going to do a video on this as well. Understanding that hardware and software complement each other, but only when software is written to take advantage of the hardware. Now, in the industry, we kind of get a little upset when we start to see 20, 30, 40% usage on our processors. Why? Because it's a little hesitant. That's not because the motherboard can't handle the workload. That's because the software still hasn't been written optimally to take advantage of the cores and load balance those cores in accordance to what goes on. The same thing is in effect for RAM. You have RAM out there, but if you're not parsing it out correctly to meet the different requirements, let's say via workstation or something like that, then you'll be at risk of memory leaks, and of course also the video card. You've got an X16 Gen 2 slot. You can put any GeForce or AMD high performance video card in there and do what you want to do. But that doesn't mean that your video card on that PCIe bus of the motherboard is going to get maximized. Matter of fact, most video cards are not even close to being stressed. The only time you ever stress a video card is if you use it in mining. And that's not really stressing, it's just more of a bandwidth issue. How many pipes that data can move in and out for your compiling. So understand that just because you've got awesome hardware doesn't necessarily mean that you have a situation where you get maximum usage of your resources. That will come in time as coders begin to start taking advantage of, like, let's say, ray tracing or RAM segmentation effect or reparsing effect, where RAM is cleaned up and freed up, just like you would do compression for storage and deduping. They can do the same thing for RAM, and so on and so on. So just understand that if you do make the leap to Xeon, you have to do a few extra steps to tweak it out so that you can get absolutely every last little advantage of such a powerful system with what you do in your operating system. Well, this is Brad Dyke signing off. I hope you guys enjoy this. It's fun in my book, and it is what it is. We try to do our best, and it's great that you guys are having fun doing this. Keep doing it. If your day job's not IT, but you have a passion for video editing, or if you have a passion for your social medias and you want your own archiving resources and all that, hey, rock and roll, whatever it takes. Men and women, make it happen. Take care and God bless.